Narfsounds here. Today I've got the sounds to play the song Thriller by Michael Jackson, made on the Yamaha Montage, and it's also compatible with the MODX, the MODX Plus, and the Montage M. You'll find this in a live set page. If you've got the favorite covers set 12, it's the page after that. And if you've got the 12-pack bundle, it's after the extras page, and you'll find it right here. So that's Thriller. It's a live set, and it's made up of several different performances. So the one that I've got in the demo is this Thriller performance, and it's a self-contained performance with all the sounds to play the keyboard parts. Even if you have a 61-key Montage or MODX, that'll all be playable. And then I also have a setup made for bass players and second keyboard players. So we've got the Moog bass in there, as well as the sound effects and other parts that can't be played by one guy. So there's two performances that you can use. And of course, if you prefer to play the sounds individually, where you have one sound per keyboard, I also have single performances to do that. Let me talk about the main Thriller sound that we'll be using. This is the one that's featured in the demo. So you press Performance Control, and this takes us to this page. And the way I set this up, we start off with scene 1. The sound effects will be found in the other performance if you want the intro SFX in there. On this one, we start on the C to get that falling star sound. When you start playing on this part of the keyboard, you have the pad plus a bit of organ as well. And on this side, we have that synth guitar as well as the organ layer. And these top notes are actually the continuation of that falling star. So that ends up on the same note as this one. And that rises up along with the chords that you play on the right hand. So it goes like this. I'm just holding down that pinky. It's just a different inversion of the same chord. It's a G sharp minor. And when we finish that intro, we go to scene 2. And that's your main Thriller riff, right? And scene 2 is only used for that, where all the sounds go together. So scene 2 is made up of parts 2 and part 3. If you listen to part 2 on its own, this is the Rhodes part. And later on, we'll be turning the Superknob, and this Rhodes part will play from this register, lower register, and when you go up, it actually becomes higher for when you're ready to go to the verse. Okay. Part 3, we have this big layer. So this is the Thriller main part. It's also found outside in that live set that I showed you. If you press Edit, you'll see that it's made up of 7 elements. And if I turn that off, so this element 1 is actually the Prophet 5. So I've been following Anthony Marinelli, who played in the Thriller album and actually programmed these sounds. And he has an instructional on how to program these sounds on the actual instruments that he used. This is sampled from my Prophet 5. And he gave very explicit instructions on how to create that sound. So I created on the Prophet 5, and it's in part 1. And this has a resonant layer on element 2. On element 3, I've got an organ sound at the bottom. On element 4, I've got the acoustic brass. So elements 5 and 6 are the ones that are used during the verse and the choruses. We use the Superknob to change between the main layer and the verse and chorus layers. So the Superknob plays a big role in managing the sounds. So when you go to scene 2, you do the main riff. And then move the Superknob halfway. And that isolates the electric piano. And after that part, you go to scene 3, and that actually just changes the position of the Superknob from 12 o'clock to here. and that introduces the verse sounds. And it's still layered with the electric piano as well. And this is how we play it. Usually when I get here, I raise the Superknob even more, and that opens up the filter. And on the top part of the keyboard, this is where we have this sound. But that note actually bends down. Since you're busy with your left hand, you can't do the bend, so I've programmed it into the note. So the riff goes. And the middle part, we find the brasses. Okay, so that's where it's at. So we have the riff up here, we have the brass in the middle, and we have verse and chorus layers here. So you keep playing until you play the next verse, verse 2. So you're still on scene 3. You can press scene 3 again so it returns it to that original position where it's not as bright. But this time the riff on the right hand becomes the brass part. So the brass part has velocity sensitivity. If you play it at high velocity, it'll introduce notes from the next octave up. So that's the register it's in. If you play it harder, it'll introduce the higher octave. Okay, you'll need that for that riff later on. When playing the second verse, you've got the brass part. So it's the same chord progression as the first verse. The second chorus, I tend to focus on the brass rather than the rhythmic keyboard. But you can do either one. That depends on how you want to perform it. If you've got a brass section, then you don't need to play the brass parts. I would focus on the brass parts because I'm in a band without any brass section. What I didn't show in the demo is you can actually turn on the arpeggio and have this part play automatically, and you can play the brass part. And from there, we go to that sort of bridge part. And before you go to the A, press the assign button, and here we have that dive sound. And we do this part. And this is when you play the brass part hard because you want it to be in the top register. Right? So play it normally, it's just in the normal register. When you play it hard, it introduces the higher notes. There's actually a tutorial on how to create the sound on the Moog, and I just followed it, and here it is. It just dives down. And that's what you get. So on this version, you press the assign one. It's a G sharp, but it's actually played on the A, and by the time you get to the G sharp, that's when it resolves to the bottom. By the way, the sustain pedal does not work on the right hand, so you have to hold down your brass notes. And that resolves to the C. And there you go. And then make sure you disengage the assign button during the next verse. Verse 3. And you still have your brass stabs there. And from here we go to scene 4, and when we play this chord, we have the theremin sound. And make sure you play legato so that slide happens. And then we go back to scene 3, and we're back to the chorus. One more time. And the transition here is quite fast. It might not be practical in a live situation. Normally, if I were to do it, I would anticipate going to the last part of the song, which has the frog bass, the organ, and also this sort of ARP sound. I would press scene 5 and assign 2 at the same time. And that's what I did in my demo. And I'd catch the C sharp, that bit. That's the frog bass, or the Froggy. It might not be possible on a MODX or a Montage M because the positioning of the scene buttons and the assign buttons might not be reachable like what I did here, or even in a 7 or an 8 might not be the same. But it is there if you want to chase that effect. So this assign to actually turns that on. And here we have the organ. Now what I didn't show in the demo is you can actually play that rhythm keyboard. And you can also move the mod wheel up, and that introduces the second organ and changes this sound in back to the theremin. So makes it thicker, right? While you're in this position, you can also play the Vincent Price samples.
Darkness follows.
There. But you'd have to hold these down because there's just no way to assign this as a drum kit where you can have it play until the sample runs out. But it is there if you want to play it. It's also in the main setup if you want to play the sound on its own outside. So when you go to the set list, you'll find it there. It's in the Thriller Effects section. And when ending the song, you can go back to scene 3 and play the brass part there. And those are the sounds for the main sound of Thriller. So that's here in the live set. For second keyboard players or bass players, so ideally, you'd probably want to play the synth bass. And that's also from the Moog. And that sounds there. And on the left side, we have drum loops. And that arpeggio keeps it on. And you can go to the next part by just playing the next note. It is synced to the measure, so I think your timing is crucial. Right? There you go. So there's 3 loops over here. And then we have the sound effects in this section. So on the F, you'll find the intro sample, and that just goes on from beginning to end. It won't stop. The note off isn't engaged. So you'll hear that. But if you do want to stop that sample, just play the black note and it'll stop. And here we have the other sound effects. That's the Starfall sample. It's also in the intro sample. So if you just let it play on, you'll hear that there. The black note again is a kill note. And then we have, I think, the door slam. We have the owl. This is a howling sound. And that's the long one. And the last howl is here. Then we have the Vincent Price samples.
Darkness. The foul.
And then we have the laugh. There you go. So you can play it from beginning to end with all the effects also included. So that's if you're a bass player or a second keyboardist. You also have Scene 2 for this setup. And Scene 2, you can turn on the arpeggio or you can play the notes. The way it's set up is up here we have the same sound as the one in the main sound. And then if you press Assign 1, we have the guitar parts. And that last rhythmic synth is on Assign 2. So those supplementary sounds are actually there as well. And that's the performance for the Thriller Bass Keys 2 setup. So you have drum loops, you have the Moog bass, not an ARP bass. I don't have an ARP, so I use the Moog. And then I've got the Keys 2 sounds. All the others that aren't the ones that I played in the first setup. Now I also have these as separate performances. Is that? The Rhodes. And of course, when you're playing them on their own, they're in the correct register. So they haven't been transposed or moved about because they're just the one sound. So in Thriller Theremin, we have the Theremin sound plus the synth string sound when you press Assign 1. So the synth string sound I wasn't able to put in the main sound anymore because there was just no way to activate it while you're playing, and I don't think it's as crucial when you're that busy, but it is here in the solo setup. The Thriller effects start on the F, just like it is set up here.
Darkness follow.
And the black notes are the kill notes. Thriller ARPs, what I showed earlier. Alright, so that was the setup for Thriller, which is part of the favorite covers set 12, the 12-pack bundle. There you have it. What you get is a live set with several sounds, including the full setup, a setup for bass and second keyboard player, and all the individual sounds separately. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoy it. We'll see ya. Bye!